Hey, everybody. I suppose it may look a little silly to you that I'm cutting down a bunch of dead grass from my front yard like it's a Christmas tree, that I glued it all together at the bottom with great stuff foam, and then I'm gonna take it inside and use it for production value. But you'd be wrong. Well, I was looking and looking and looking for these down here, high and low, in and out, and I knew that I would have never let anybody throw them out. These are the railing balusters, or the guardrail posts from Shrek, from Fiona's castle, in an effort to keep the walkway around the balcony narrower, the walkway around that hangs out. Keep it narrower, but make room for action and for Shrek and Fiona. It was unsafe in the sense that the balcony kind of ended here where my left foot is, and then the railing, the guard railing, hung out at this location with this center line, right where I smashed my head on that piece of wood. So what can happen is that your body's sense of where the railing is can betray you, and you can feel as though that there's floor over here, and you end up making a bad step. So despite that, it's a set piece, and as long as it's got something to hang on to and it isn't actively sabotaging everybody and they can practice long enough with it, it's not a big deal. So they were curved, and the silhouette was nice. In the end, it was all a balance, but most of them were 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood glued together for other reasons on the show, but then from the areas that weren't part of those pieces, I made all of these. And in fact, a couple of them, because I ran out of space on that area, 1 or 2 is made from LVL, or maybe not. I forget exactly, but it takes a lot to get 3/4 inch plywood glued together, and then to lay these out and jigsaw them out through that kind of a thickness with the hole in it and everything else. So I used a little great stuff to fill in around the railing for some reason. Maybe because it ended up being too large of a hole. Yeah, it was a much bigger hole than the size of the PVC that I went through it, because once these were all installed, I could bend that and it would control the bend in that PVC. So that'll be the size that we use again. But what am I getting at? This is going to be so helpful to have a robust, multiple profiles, and all the same with a curve like this. I'm going to try to get this to keep the bow shape going up and becoming a railing by turning them around to face us, or to bow out this here, and use them on the boat, as well as these 4 curved, they ended up being sole plates for the wall that was up at the core of that tower. Because it was curved, the plate needed to be curved, and I needed enough to attach the material to keep it to curving, so I made some curved plate. So there's probably a place on this ship for those shapes, these shapes, and let's get back up there and see what I can make happen. All right, when I have some help, I will unpin this and ask a couple kids or someone to hang on it to take it all the way down to the stop on this side, and then I'll install from the same exact position on this cross member, which is, perfectly symmetrical here, to that one. I'll install the same rod in the same orientation with essentially the same mounting location. And then again, when this tips up, I'll take that plate up and stop and square up based on the lines and center up. It should essentially mean that that's an exact mirror image of this location, which I'll check after I've pinned it. But since I've been careful about tolerance here for the whole time, slapping this together, hopefully they're the same strut, acting in the same way equally on either side of a system centered on this pivot. And in fact, this is a little low on the left right now, but the idea would be that it held it basically level, which will be easy to perceive based on the little differences at the surface to this stairway and the other. So, and I can even dial it in after that. But for right now, I don't have the ability to pull it down and then screw it down and unscrew. I was screwing the stop into the framing to hold it before. So anyway, in short order, we'll be able to do that. And then I'm thinking that since it's balanced and those have a 300-pound compression rating, I forget what we said. Anyway, whatever I said I was going to spec out, I spec'd out. And so it'll either be easy enough to utilize blocking to keep the ship moving at a very that's kind of interesting to see it moving like that, very reasonably based on the blocking and the performance that's happening. And it doesn't matter from either perspective, because the stairs will buckle to the base and there'll be a filler piece so that the surface is walkable from one piece to the other piece, but they'll buckle to the base, which doesn't move. And so basically this can wash back and forth past the stair while the stair is effective and a complete service, probably like with an inch or half of an inch gap here to keep it, from being a pinch point for fingers or something, probably. But you'll never be able to see through that gap because you don't look at it that way. So since that's my plan, what type of angle to put on that piece? Well, I've done a few things here, which is the point of this now that I'm 18 fucking minutes into talking. I rolled up the piece basically where it goes at one point in the show, but you also notice that the trapdoor is 10 feet long, the piece is 10 feet long. I'm backed up to it pretty easily, pretty perfectly. And then, I bring this corner into whatever I think my tolerance needs to be over there, and then where to go with it and what angle to put on it. Well, I know that I'm going to use one half of this on either side to quickly create a tipped out. I'm going to put it on tipped out. So it'll be undercut and curved, and it's got that kind of unique point on the end of it that makes it seem like I put more effort into this than I am doing. I tried cutting it in half with a break so that I was thinking if we took the piece away, we'd have that silhouette, but obviously the full stairs behind it won't work. So I just slapped it back together with some PL adhesive a couple days ago, taped and pressed it. It's good as new. So now I'll actually perfectly, I think it's down this seam, I'll perfectly cut it straight in half. And then that corner can go up to the plane where we're maintaining a tolerance, so it'll sit back here, but it doesn't matter because the rest of the bow is going to come around and play out onto this in such a way that it makes a nice transition from this angle, and it'll lay flat, and it should work the other way around as well. Looking at it from here, basically looking at it this way. So what I'm doing here is I know that this piece is going to sit at the same angle across the bottom as the stairs are going to sit, and it'll rock out here somewhere. And I know that inside of these two areas that have got marker are 3/4 inch plywood panels that I glued to the back of the cardboard, and that's what we hung this from, and that's sort of the bones or the core of this piece. So there's probably a stick that goes down here or here somewhere. There's a framing stick here somewhere within this boundary, and I'm basically going to make a wedge or create something to hold it at a certain angle here to there at this location where I can hold it, and off the floor a bit so that we don't scuff it at all. And that'll be a nice start. But the thing is how to pick this angle, etc. Well, I've rolled everything up here because I'm looking for what this is doing as a curve, and then whether it'll play out right here, which it should be able to there. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But I don't want it to be unnecessarily open or weirdly closed. And the more open it is, then performance can happen over the edges of these stairs, and people can see that, maybe. So a bit wider is good in that way, but also I want to, when we're looking at this way, to feel like we're on a ship and that there are areas of the stage that are water and it isn't just spread out and flattened. I like depth. So I think I'm getting close to what I want here. So I can cut that cardboard thing back in half cleanly, and I can take a stab at an angle to tip it out from the stair, because I know that the end of it can be squidgy down, no need to be off the floor a certain amount. And especially if I utilize something that I can adjust quick, I can pick that out and then be sure of the location of the stair, and then make a plan for the framed component that I want to build that will basically attach to the stairway and get us across to here and support a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood to step on there and carry something down this face to make it so you can't see into here. And that's pretty much all you need here. And then I can do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I built the top triangles from 2x8 because they're a walk surface and they will be nice and rigid. And we had the material, and now I'm going to throw a triangle of subfloor of some kind on there. Lo and behold, what was left of the full sheet that came from out from under the rowboat, there's enough in the corner. I'm fairly sure, I guess I didn't check. Yeah, perfect. So we'll make that out of those, and then we'll have a surface on this that comes over and stops against the back of the ship. However, I think we're going to maintain 1.5 inches, which will mean if we were to copy those in 2x4 even at the bottom, then we have enough to support a wall or a surface that extends that and closes the gap that you see on the open side of the angle, and a pair of surfaces that come over in our coplanar. So if we're trying to maintain a gap here, and this is 1.5 inches outside of that framing, then all we have to do is add 1.5 inches to that, and then whatever we want for a gap, and then when it comes over and stops that to that, it'll attach there, and then it'll float up here. Long story short. Huffing and puffing, opening the trapdoor just to close it again in half an hour. All right, so I'll put the floor on this, and I'll put them on there, and then I got to come up with a way to knock out the lower ones and try to get them to latch and attach. Oh, and I got this gas cylinder attached. So now, it's pushing as much as one side's pushing as the other is pulling. So I can actually personally far more easily pull that down. It doesn't quite snap back to perfectly level. I could add more weight and that would probably do that. However, I don't think there's any benefit to, I think the more that this moves a little bit when people are walking around, the better it'll look as a ship. They just need to be comfortable with it, and we need to make sure that none of their blocking creates a weird movement with it. So there's that going on. One thing I will say is that my weight quickly closes this on either end, so I might even have doubled those in terms of rating. So what's nice is if I decide to do that, I can order them, they'll show up the next day, and the ends and the bracket and everything can stay the same, I think. And we can just pop them into place, although they can't be closed at all. These I couldn't even close. They're 300 pounds. I couldn't squish them down to get them into place. So what I did was I opened it as far as it could open and installed them there so that at the end of their stroke, it's at the height of the movement that we have. So what I'm saying is, if I need ones with greater resistance to compression, they need to be close enough in overall length when opened to maintain these bracket locations, or I guess that would stay and I'd just move the block up or down a little bit. So I'll get as close as I can, but I think it's going to make sense to get more powerful ones. So that's in the works, but you just gotta, I don't know, I could do all this geometry and do FEA on it, but I'm not that comfortable. And by the time I spent getting to that point in the computer, there'd be something else I wasn't accounting for. So this way, cut to the chase, do it live, I'll write it, and maybe we'll get it to work. So I'm going to put a surface on these. I'm still trying to get it so they can try and rehearse with this today. Well, it came down to the wood shop because I need to cut off 62 degrees. And so I did that hack job with the Sawzall a couple of times on those 2x8s, but I figured I'd see if I can't do it more easily here. I can go to 60 on this saw, which would have been close enough. The problem is someone built it into this bench, and we hit not even 55. And I'm not comfortable cutting that off because I don't even think taking it off to the face frame would get me there. So we've got a little engineering snafu here, but too bad, so sad. Well, we keep honing in on this situation. I got the wedges, I guess we could call them, built. I entertained the notion of making this one larger by the amount that I needed to get to the frame to hold this off a ways. However, then that wouldn't have gone to a knife point. It would have been additive. And so at that point, I may as well just make another one and add layers to it, I started thinking. So I just knocked out a couple 2x4 versions of these 2x8 triangles. And then I realized that I need to be 3 inches off of there because that is to here. And then this is outside of that. So that's inch and a half there. And then I wanted an inch and a half here. So, or at least something. And because I had that 4x4 from something else that I was going to do that I didn't decided against, that made the right amount to hold us at a nice inch and a half. And then I had planned to point that in and let it basically hook like a French cleat. And, you know, a 2x4 would probably do it, but there's no harm in using a piece of this because it's just so much more surface area, obviously twice as much or more. And so the registration will be really good. And I've got these big long screws laying around so I can pull through the pair and still go 3 inches or more into that 6x6. But for whatever reason, my drill gun is not doing it, which is weird. Got that far with the one and gave it up. Normally you want to get started moving and just keep moving until it's all the way together. I might have stopped in the middle or anything like that. The outside corner of this piece, I just ran a strut down. I added a stick so we had something to return whatever we cover this with, and I kept it behind the layer of Luan that's there so we could use, or whatever, underlayment I should start saying. And then there's enough here to attach it to keep it smooth. Then the other one I went ahead and made and forgot it first, and I just had this, but then I thought between above and below and that, you could try to find that. Luan would be fine, but I ended up just hacking it shorter and adding this. Just nice to have something all the way around. If you needed something here, you know, I would put something there, but I don't think we'll need it. It's just going to be a gap there basically, and as well as the mast tipping with the upper portion and having to put, a surface on here. We're going to have to deal with that somehow. Not quite sure what I'm going to do, because you can't fit something to this because this would crash into it, and you can't fit something to this because it would crash into that. We're going to have to do something here. I'd like to really just build up some little barrels and maybe one of that chest or something over there if it doesn't work perfectly for Ariel's grotto. If I set that stuff in here really quickly, and just basically just attach it to one of these pieces so it's screwed in and floats off the floor, then it just covers a problematic spot, and, you know, crisis averted basically. The problem that we're going to have with that is once we're in there, we need to latch with one of those pole barn latches over here somehow. So I put a 45 on that just to give it a little bit more surface area of engagement. I didn't want that to come any farther over here, that 4x4, because at some point here I've got to come down from this piece that moves and then use that location to bend something around to the bow that's coming at us. And I don't want things in the way if it's coming down and moving into that area. Just a real loose area here. As long as I have enough something to support the skin, this will remain like unfinished and whatever else. So if the latch is in there, the problem is you can't come at it from here. This will be a finished surface for the most part, and you can't really weasel around in there and then weasel back out and around. It'll be whatever's on here will be laying against this, which I have to dial this in, and like we were talking, those angles and stuff still. So I got to find out if we're going to have crew in this thing to just help it move more smoothly or be more controlled by pushing up and down here at this, in which case it'd have a place to sit and they can reach over there and latch it, because all of that, you know, will be open to them. However, I will have to slap something against that sticks up, because when this comes down, it moves in, and there's just a pinch point here, and I don't need a kid's fingers there for any reason, like for stability. Put a hand there, and then it just get the fingers all crushed or something. So we need to protect anything from happening in both cases if we're going to put somebody in here. And it can't be just to latch things, because that's a waste of a person. But again, we got to find out if somebody needs to be in there. It's a process. So we're working on that. I'm also going to, and I'm glad that I didn't build any wedges or cut any angles or do anything here yet. I did it this way because I had these hinges as part of that solution to something else I wasn't going to employ. But happily, I had these nice big hinges, and all I had to do here is get from the plywood that's inside up high enough to come over onto a step, and then this is the same amount of exposure. These are all the same thicknesses on either side. It's on the same step. We're in the same location, and then I'm off the floor a little ways, and I just put one of those long screws at the elevation of the framing inside of that stair, right straight through the plywood. If I thought I was going to go through the cardboard and actually pull into the plywood, but I ended up just stopping at the cardboard with those nice big ledge lock heads. They're good enough. I wouldn't leave it like this for the show. Obviously, there's a trip hazard here and it's ugly, but that'll allow me to quickly pull those up, move this in, move it out, and just find the perfect angle. And I'll likely leave it like that until, you know, we're really getting to a point here where everything's working. This angle I'm committed to is the thing. So I like having flexibility here, because I came as close to being happy with what I'd chosen as I could, because this needs to happen because of stability. But this stuff needs to float out here and look correct. And so I've left myself the ability to dial it. And there's some other things I'm going to dial. I have to cut some kind of a profile of a foreshortened bow in plywood, probably a pair of them. And then I needed something that tips like this does. I had thought I'd slap them on either side of this 6x6, but it doesn't tip. So I'm gonna have to throw a block in. It's just kind of scabbed down right now, but just give myself something here to slap the two pieces onto it. And then between them at the bottom, I can throw the same type of thing. So I just have a nice sort of attachment point that's got kind of a lot of surface area on it. It's pretty heavy, you know, it's a lot of meat there in a cube of 6x6 or a short piece of it. And we've got some floating around between those two plywood pieces. Because then I think I need to start on one half of it and bend something over here to a stick that comes down from inside at whatever angle is going to be right. That's another angle that I can play with here. Stick that comes down no longer than what would come within an inch of the floor when this is tipped to its lowest point. And so that's screwed in here and holding that shape. And then from the end of it, I can bend to that block. I can do the same thing on the other one, and we'll start to get the bones of this surface that needs to be out here. And then I got those plywood uprights from Fiona's tower, like I was talking about. And with those, I got 7 of them. Weirdly, I could have sworn I had an even number. But with those, I can start looking at how they work out here with everything that I've chosen for the curve of this boat. And so whatever this, you know, it actually was going to be curved, this roof, or it was going to be flared. This bulkhead was originally bigger here so that the roof came down and then truly kicked out at the body line, the same body line. From there, right through here, from there, it was supposed to kick out wider. But the problem we had was flying it in. It was going to come too close to scrubbing something. So I last minute cut that back. I think we flew it without the skin on the front, and that was clearly an issue. So, and then I cut it back. Anyway, we would have had a true angle here. What's my point? My point is that existed, these existed. I'm figuring this out live, and there's a lot of looseness, obviously, with the way that things fit, but it's not going to be a problem for us with this set piece, which is neat. There's some things that are built specifically to engage at the right angles and stuff, and other controls, but I'm just letting go of stuff that doesn't fit perfectly or isn't built necessarily exactly for this. And I think the looseness of that is really going to look cool. I think the opening that exists back there that goes down behind the stair and other things there add depth and shadow and variation to the color that we put on it. And, you know, I'll never miss finishing those things in. I had originally realized that there would be that void, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to make stair extensions to go over here, either out of cardboard, but that's a hazard because if it looks like you could step there and you can't, that's like a tiger trap. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna have to put a little square of plywood all the way and extend it out, and then maybe it'll need a knee under it because I don't want to change the step height very much, so I can't add something very thick and then it isn't very substantial, and it just spiraled out of control. And then I thought, you know what, let's do nothing. So that's my plan right now with that scenario. Another thing that I realized is no matter what, I mean, those are 300 pounds of collapsing pressure and 450 pounds of extension pressure. But the thing is, they're acting on one another equally. So the feel is that of it being very easy to dial it, to move it. Because that is loaded around with the extension pressure of that and pushing the compression pressure, the compression and vice versa. What I'm saying is, if I went to, those are 300 pound compression, if I went to 6 and threw them in there, I think that they would cancel each other out again and it would be as easy to move. What I think though, as you go up in pressure, I think that the time that it takes to close them, the softness, you know, if I walk up here and I step on this, it closes slower than it would if there was nothing backing it up. And actually, this is going to hit the floor loudly and scare somebody if I do that. So let me just set this here. This feels good out here. Oh yeah, it feels nice and solid. So I step onto this and it closes down. Walk over here and it's slow. There to there. So walk over here, clunk. So it's slower, clunk. But that's just my body weight. So I believe that if I go up in resistance, it will take longer to close with the amount of weight that we're putting up there, which is more than one person's worth. So the difference between 300 and 450 is 150. So that's why I'm like 180, 190. So I think that's why I quickly shut it. As soon as you make 2 people up there doing that, that happens faster. But we've got 2 or 3 people up there. So if they're offsetting one another, then you start doing that math. As soon as you move past the middle point here, you're being additive or subtractive or taking or leaving things. So it's a really complicated thing. There's a lot of variables. I'm enjoying it, but I kind of need to test and tune. So, that's what we're going to do. I think I'm probably going to stick with these cylinders. I don't know. I should reserve the right to amend my thinking if I decide to. See that you can't exactly, the threads aren't cut so that the hole through these necessarily is aligned when they both come in tight. So there's some exposed thread, but that's more than I would want. This one is practically tight there. It's practically tight there. I've at least consumed most of the thread. So that's another thing that, maybe that's why this pushes more. It's a little higher up. No, that wouldn't account for it. This is a little bit longer overall as a result of those threads being open. So if anything, you would think it would sit that way. I thought maybe that was what was going on, which would have been interesting. I'm just having a lot of fun with this. We haven't used something like that since Suzical in 2012. So, over 10 years, obviously, 12, 13 years ago, we used something like that. So do you need them around all the time? Even with somebody like me that wants to do sets like this? Not even really. So, I won't go in on the big investment there, but it has been clutch in this particular situation. I think that the counterweight is still doing its job, and I can always add weight. So we got taking or leaving weight, we've got changing out the cylinder strength, we've got the amount of people and the way that they move up here, we've got whether or not a crew person's going to sit on either side and kind of lift or pull down to soften it as well. Lots of things going on. And not to mention, this is only one major quarter of, where I need to spend time and energy from now over the next 8 days to knock this thing out, get it done. But right now I'm going to pack it in. Back tomorrow. Well, I got these pieces from last year from Matilda dragged out today, and I just feel as though they're complementary, and they're going to be as though the side of the ship is ramping up at the stairway, so we can take off and go higher to the point of the bow from there. It had me thinking for a second, this is pretty avant-garde, or just an interesting way to basically just stop being the set environment and to be imaginary. It's obviously because the piece was built for something else. I didn't choose this, but I thought it was pretty striking. It does make me wonder, and I'm looking at like the overall length of this upper piece from here to here is practically the same as the overall length of this flat side here. It's maybe a little bit, 2 or 3 inches longer right there. But if I were to flip and reverse this, would that angle keep kind of carrying down some more? And then would it tip out and engage with the floor and make more sense, because it's continuing to sort of break down and taper out to the set? And, you know, I have flexibility in that because I really just tack these up here. So there's a chance I would look at it that way, but there's a chance I'll just roll with, like I said, kind of what looks like a cool choice, intentional. And it would kind of be, but it came about kind of accidentally. So, but sometimes you want to take credit for those things, you know what I mean? So what are you going to do? And I got some grass out of the front yard, and I got it bound to that stick on a circle with a handle. I want to go around the stick, and I'd like to paint it out black first. I've got to plug up that window hole, paint this piece. I got to put some wings on that to engage with the shape of the side of these tree trunk tower pieces, which is what I'm actually doing here. So I laid this out from a template I had from last year for making Duloc, the facade of Duloc Castle, or from Shrek, not last year, fit into those towers. So I just traced that out, and I made some new ones here so that these come in tightly and it closes that sight line. I'll probably put another one on the other side just to carry the face of the thickness of the wall to kind of help, because I need to get to that with something, with whatever we skin this, however we skin this. And then can't be bumping into stuff, so it's getting bigger. And we just got to be careful about that because it's going to be kind of spindly out there. But it was that or cut into these flats, which I can't do. I mean, I technically can, but I better not because they're not mine to carve up. I still hate that this one's built with 1x material. I just went to stick one of these on here and was just loath to start drilling into the edge of those for whatever reason. It's just, I can't picture myself taking it out of there, as well as making another one out of 2x4 and a sheet of Luan that we don't have just to replace it with. So I think I'm gonna have to roll with it, which is really starting to really get under my nerves and on my last skin. But anyway, got some big old cardboard here, and I gotta start thinking about the front of the ship. I'll probably get into CAD after this and draw out what I need for a profile for this bow, and then bring that in a way that I can put it down on a piece of plywood and get a couple of those made. Slap them on this here, and then start seeing where I've got to jump to it for a chin strap, like I was saying at the bottom of it. Start carrying the face of the bow, and keep working on this. I got to get some shelves in there for Ursula so we can put all of her souls, unfortunate souls. And then I think, I don't know, I got to find a way to build out and around this stuff a little bit, as well as the mirror frame, and put a mirror in that frame. And I wanted the top of this to like ramp up here, have some type of a profile shape there. So I'm going to have to stick something up there to kind of carry that. And then I'm going to go down the front of most of this stuff with that crinkled up paper. So I had the pleasure of not having to do this time. I gave some capable students the technique, and they were able to replicate it for the most part. So anyway, let me take a peek in the CAD and get a little bit of a night's sleep, and then I got to get back here and pedal to the metal tomorrow. So a couple things with this ship. To optimize it for rehearsing today, the shipwreck, which is the whole reason that it tips around, I think that we want crew to control the movement of the ship, because if you haven't got anybody deliberately doing that, it's just the position and the movements of the people up, the performers. And while the argument could be made that you could make that work, it requires some peripheral things that we haven't got, like a little bit more time, people who have got more experience with performance, etc. So initially I was thinking the only place to really be here is to sit facing the pivot this way and to sit facing the pivot this way, and to kind of work up and down overhead, just put some handles on these components here, make a seat position there, and have the ability to push up and down looking at one another to run it more like a seesaw. So these stops come down, and it's an incredible pinch point right there. And so I figured, right to start with, we got to make it so that nobody can get their fingers underneath that. So I decided to slap 2x8s on, because I've also got to be outside of, or inside of this, as well as this. And I got to be this way as much as I can right there to the corner, because the location of this stop is actually centered in the overall width, which, since the corner was cut in, it's nearer. So And then I picked an arbitrary height, but I was thinking better not to, under every circumstance imaginable, have someone's head be able to tip back or anything here. So I made it high enough for that, but not so high that it stops any of this mechanical stuff. And then I realized, I really don't like so deliberately seating somebody and so reinforcing their position, looking right at the end of a gas cylinder that's got 300 pounds of resistance to compression and the strength of 450 pounds in extension, and no engineering. I've done everything I can to over-engineer the situation, but I don't need this thing to come apart, because in becoming longer, it's like right at somebody's face here. So I just think it's irresponsible, even if we were going to iron everything out, to make a situation like that if I could avoid it. So I think I'm down to standing people in this position on either end outside of this scenario and working up in here, probably someone shorter, but to basically stand up and pull back down. I'll have to install some handles in there, but that's going to be the best case situation. The stairs come in, lock in here, the hull comes down and around. They're going to have to stay in that roll and do their very best. So I still want to protect that pinch point. And I think my solution is going to be, as I measured from this, it's missing this corner, but from the outside corner here to the outside corner over there, it's about 14 inches, and same this way. However, it's only about 10 inches face to face. So I think that squeezing a 12-inch sonotube, if I can't get a slightly larger than 12, but not quite a 16-inch diameter sonotube, cardboard tube, I think squeezing a little bit to oblong, it would ride in here, and I could actually use these to my advantage, because just slipping it over that to just sit and stay planted, it needs to move in and out enough just to be a racket. So this will allow it to float. This is the maximum that it would be filled, because when this block comes in, it moves inward like that. So it would become loose, and then as the stop lifts out, it would come tight. And I'm hoping that means that it doesn't lift, because that's the opposite of what we're trying to do, that whole tube assembly. Anyway, it'd just be a loose tube that sits around all of this, that you'd have to be so deliberate to put your hand down inside of it. I'll probably get a 4-foot piece, cut it right in half, put 2 feet on this end, 2 feet on the other end, call it done. So I will ultimately use the block that I started building, I think. So I'm going to slap it in over there. The other thing I need here is to determine the hull shape, so I can determine an outside guardrail, so I can make it robust in some places to contain everyone and make it much safer to rehearse this and to have blocking that looks like people are in distress because the ship is sinking. I don't have any of that geometry, because I need to make that plywood that's the bow profile, and then I need to get a chin going, which is a product of bringing legs down the side that line up with the geometry that we put on the side of the stairs. And it's basically all related so that I can get this right, and I know what the curve is doing to follow through, because then my plan is to use these components that I dug out from Shrek and to finish doing that curve, but I don't know where, up, down, in, out to go with it until I've got the rest of what's going on here, and then I can put that in place, and then I could start trying to tie it together and make it, a functional rail. I don't think that's going to work on our timeline, since basically later today is when I need to start letting them rehearse the shipwreck. So what I do know is that that's a really nice, strong connection that I made for that 6x6. I dropped it into the pivot and then pinned it with those big screws, 2 on both sides. It's really nice and strong. So I can slap a 2x4 onto the front of it at an elevation that I can move this, but I'm going to try my best to be at where the opaque bow is going to cover that. And it is going to run downhill from there. Anyway, I'll just put something in here over to this side and the other. So there's like a lane where there's railing on either side of it for right now. It's all built in. It can come over here and stop, but it'll allow, when this tips all the way to the limit and Eric comes off of it, it'll allow him and whoever's working there to really have a handhold and everything until the very last part of leaving the set piece. So, and in the end, it'll be covered that way. And it may even provide a pivot point around which the side of the bow that has to come off. But although I think I probably finished the whole bow in, like I'm planning to do with cardboard, and then I'll just cut a hole out and make it like a trapdoor that looks like some wood boards breaking out, and have them just stuck there. So when you push through it, it can, like 3 or 4 board ends can like open up and fall away, and he can come out of there. I think is what it's going to have to look like. So I can just scab in these features today so that we've got what we need for rehearsal. And then I'm going to try and get away from this thing at that point and get back to work on the turntable a little bit to prove out some thinking I was doing yesterday. Well, I got excited to think that there was more of this genuine 1/4-inch plywood that I bought for the sides of the rowboat, but there might be one strip down the center that's 12 feet long. I was thinking I might have, I don't know why I was thinking I might have so much, but all those 12-foot long strips I thought would really be potentially really significant, because I could go not only from the top to the bottom of an 8-foot flat, but I could really curve out with it and do something larger than anything else you can do with what's, you know, going to amount to 8 foot is going to be the longest length strip I can make. But we got a bunch of strip stuff. It's getting down to, like, you know, not a lot left to do with it, but I'm glad that we saved it. So I'm going to do as much as I can to cut several layers together, and I'm going to start right now and see what this will do. Excuse me for a bend. I was just eating some lunch, and happily this Ursula side of the turntable has got both flats framings exposed, where for Ariel's Grotto it's complete, and actually Triton is missing one, so I have yet to decide. I might change which is which if it behooves me to utilize a space that's got a surface on both sides already. I want to remember that, right? But for now, let's see what this will do. So we've had a couple snafus on this one, and by snafus I mean, or a couple, I mean, we got a scale issue here for Triton's pickle fork, and they ran into a problem with an unusable area. I guess since the router's on this side of the gantry, they can't go into that area, and there was something, I mean, it cut most of it. It's the same line. It's the same line over and over. Unless he did finish cutting it and it's got this groove in it, like I couldn't care less about that. That's no problem at all. So basically it's done and it's good as soon as it pops off of there. Although I really wish I asked him, I thought he understood what I was saying. If you take the two tips of the handles and you bring them over, then you can make the whole thing larger. You could get to this, if this is a boundary, unless these are boundaries too. But I was saying take the 2 points and pull it to the limit of the work area instead of the one, because it could be just a bit bigger. Whatever. What do I know, you know? And then, yeah, so 3D printing issues and CNC issues, and back to work stripping, making them aspenite. That's what we used to call it. What do they call it now? It's a certain type of fiber that I can't think of. Something board. Yucca board. Must be eucalyptus fibers. Sure, it's super good to breathe. Jeez. I'm going to strip it up. I'm going to kick the dust collection on. But, you know, I have a YouTube channel for one reason. And it's because my buddy Adam really pushed me to do this, and he's been my biggest fan for years. He's given me a bunch of good info, camera equipment. He's always watching the content, which I can't believe, and he was always you know, checking in about projects, picking out details. Like I said, my biggest fan, and that's because he had a significant amount of success with his YouTube channel, and you know, he wanted to share the love, right? So unfortunately, a week ago, he passed away at 36 years old, a day before his 37th birthday, from brain cancer. And I was just about to make a joke about the fibers being good to breathe, but you know, we'll do what we can do. I'll run the dust collection. I can't be sure, no one could be sure what caused the brain cancer. But he was also a puppet maker. He's been a part of this show countless times, from lending us his full-size Grinch costume that he made for Seussical. He lent us a bunch of stuff for Shrek. He lent us a bunch of stuff for something else that I can't think. Oh, Little Shop of Horrors. So the Audrey 2 puppets, he essentially built all of those. I built some core foundational pieces for that, and we did the work together, but I mean, those are his babies. And so, yeah, a big part of the theater component and the entertainment design and puppetry and special effects component to my life, and inspired me to do all of this. We met in California, sequestered to potentially be on a TV show. And we weren't allowed to exchange personal information, but we got to chatting, all of us. I've made friends on that I still have today. This was in 2013. And anyway, after that was all over with, he reached out because he found out by Googling around that we only lived like 40 minutes away from each other. So he reached out in 2014, and like we just became really fast friends, working together a lot, socializing a lot. He introduced me to his wife, and then they introduced me to his wife's best friend, and now she's my wife. And, you know, they were there for our son's birth. They were the only people that were there. My in-laws, my parents, nobody else. Adam and his wife were there with us when Henry came into the world last year. And there's been a bunch of hurdles with doing the musical this year. The first year doing it as a new father. Last year I did it while my son was, trying to come out early, and my wife was on bed rest at the hospital. And And so I thought this year would be a nice return to form a little bit, which is to say just financial problems for us and nothing else. But there were financial problems last year along with that, and there's financial problems this year along with this too. So anyway, it's tough, but I'm pulling out all the stops on this one. I'm thinking of you, Adam, wherever you are. It's going to be a long time before I don't think of you every day, one way or another. Love you, bud. Back to work. Well, it's time to bug out. I am not productive anymore. I've just run out of steam, but that's okay. Go home, relax, recoup, back tomorrow. I got a bunch more of those creepy anemone things I can sprinkle around. I can make more of this barnacle kind of easily. I'm pretty happy with this stuff. I think it's limited by those cans, and I've got paper, exposed in some places, but I really tried to load it up in these areas that I need to stay substantially in support while I cut this opening larger. And, looking in there, I think it's going to be fine. I think that there are a bunch of things holding those shapes. Part of me wants to just spray some of that inside to trap it. I just don't know. I just don't know if it'll become hard enough or, what's going to occur there. I'll just hope for the best, I guess. She's got a big dress, so she's going to have a relatively large opening. But I think one way or another we'll get something to look pretty cool there. And over here at Ariel's grotto, I've got the bump there swinging up into like some silt piled against this shape here that I'll pull down with some of that wrinkled paper. Just got to get some of the people stuff figured out for that. And then same, but in reverse for Triton. It's built up against this column here and it goes up and over there. I don't think that I can get away from seeing, it depends. If I can get Triton's throne up high enough, then the shell background can reach up and cover just the very back. And those can be blacked out from the back side, so you're not seeing the silhouette or more than the silhouette of another side of the turntable. And, over here, I think it'll work there okay. It's one of those things that's like really nice and technical if you can break the silhouette of the other sides on each given side. But like the scope of this project is so great and my time is so short that it might just have to be something that like just adds busyness there. I mean, we know that it's a theater show, so we're not fooling anybody. These balloon arches from Walmart, I had the crew inflate them and stick them together for me. We lost a few, but there's some more of the little strip that you can put all the little balloon knots into, if you know what I mean. And so I'll probably put those together into a third, kind of smaller one. And I'm going to try and coat them with that foam just to start with, I guess, and see if that'll hold up as well as the foam from a can did on those other balloons. The ship is working for them. I got some footage of them rehearsing with it. I think the stops, because of the hull cutting in, I think the stops are in the way now of the operators. I think, like I said, I chose not to sit here, but to stand, and I put handles on both sides for them to stand, but their knees are kind of ending up in this area here. And so part of me, you really have to pull on one side and push on the other to close it to a stop. So part of me wants to pop those stops off because I expect when the cylinders are fully compressed, basically, it's right about where those are coming in to land at the same time. I'm fairly certain. And, the reality is it can't go any farther than the weight pack hitting that 6x6, which we just stopped a little bit short of there for a super safety. And if we're relying on those stops because something broke, I think we're really in a bad way. I don't know. I may make a stop somewhere else. I could always put something right on the side of here, going down at an angle that just lands down there, in and away from these operators. Maybe I'll do that. That's a nice balance. Put a stop. I can do it on the front. On the back, no, I can get in there too, and add 1.5 inches in there. So maybe, there's nothing for it to hit though. Yeah, that's going to be the rub. So, yeah, I'll probably just add something. It's an emergency thing. It doesn't have to be, these are nice and centered, but I'll put it on the front of this and have it hit that wherever it will. I don't know. So, the boat, I'm not going to get to putting the little ride-on, remote controlled kids ride-on toy through the bottom of it so that it can drive itself, but we're not taking it apart. And I think the next time we need a boat, I'll try to do that. for right now, I think it's a nice looking boat, and it rolls really nice and it comes down close to the floor. The choreography will make it look cool, and those grasses are going to look nice out here with it, nice and romantic. So I'm shot. I got to go home and try again tomorrow.